Key was right where I'd left it, tucked under the third stone from the porch step, the one with the chip on the corner. I bent down and felt around in the cold dirt, my fingers brushing against the small metal shape, and for a second I almost smiled. 3 weeks. 3 weeks of back-to-back closings, a deal that nearly fell apart twice, a client who called me at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday to ask if granite countertops were going to outlast quartz. I'd earned this weekend. I'd earned the silence. I'm going to call her mom in this story, and my stepfather Roy and my half-sister June, because using their real names still makes my jaw tighten. My name doesn't really matter for the telling, but I'll say I was 31, a real estate attorney in Philadelphia, and the cabin in the Poconos was the one thing in my life that was just mine. Not inherited, not gifted, not co-signed. I bought it with money I'd scraped together over 6 years of 70-hour weeks, plus a chunk from a settlement on a building dispute I'd handled pro bono that turned into a referral pipeline. Every dollar in that cabin had my fingerprints on it. I unlocked the door and pushed it open with my shoulder, expecting that particular smell I always got first thing. Cedar, wood smoke from the fall, a little dust. Instead, what hit me was paint. Fresh paint, thick and chemical, and underneath it something sour, like sawdust soaked in coffee. I stood in the entryway with my duffel bag still on my shoulder and just blinked. The hallway runner was gone. The little side table with the lamp, gone. The framed black and white photo of the lake I'd taken myself the first weekend I owned the place, gone. In its place was a strip of plastic sheeting taped to the floor, the kind contractors use to protect hardwood. Except they hadn't bothered protecting anything because half the hardwood was already pulled up. I walked toward the back of the cabin slowly, the way you walk when your brain hasn't caught up to your eyes. The kitchen looked mostly the same, except there were coffee cups in the sink. 2 of them. Lipstick on one. Then I turned left toward the master bedroom, and that's when my legs actually stopped working for a second. The wall between my bedroom and the ensuite bathroom had been knocked out. Just knocked out. There was a tarp where the wall used to be, and behind the tarp I could see studs, exposed pipes, and a stack of tile boxes still wrapped in plastic. The tile was cream and gold marble. My bathroom had been slate gray and white. My bed was gone. My dresser was gone. In the corner where my reading chair used to sit, there was a roll of wallpaper. I picked it up. Heavy, expensive, the kind that costs $80 a roll. I unrolled about a foot of it. It was pink. Not soft pink. Not blush. It was a hot, candy, pageant queen pink with metallic gold flourishes that looked like a wedding cake exploded onto a wall. I stood there holding that wallpaper and I think I made a sound. Not a word. Just a sound. That's when I heard the footsteps on the porch. "Honey? You here already?" It was my mother's voice, bright and casual, the way she always sounded when she was about to tell me something I wasn't going to like. I turned around just as she walked in, and behind her was Roy, my stepfather, in his usual flannel and his usual smug little half grin, holding a thermos like he owned the place. "Oh good, you're here," Mom said, glancing past me into the wreckage of my bedroom like it was a minor inconvenience. "I was hoping we'd get here before you saw it. We wanted to surprise you." "Surprise me," I said. "With the renovation," she said. "Roy's been overseeing it. Doesn't it look amazing already?" "Wait until you see the tile." June picked it out. My half-sister's name landed in the room like a stone dropped into a glass. I set the roll of wallpaper down very carefully on the floor. I made my hands flat against my thighs because I could feel them trembling, and I did not want them to see that. "What is June's tile doing in my bathroom?" I said. Mom laughed. Actually laughed. "Oh, sweetie. Well, that's the surprise. We've been talking about it for a couple of months. Roy and I and June and her husband, and we just thought, you're never up here. You're always at work. You're always traveling for those depositions or whatever it is you do. And June and Cyrus, they really need a place. They've been so stressed since the layoffs, so we thought, well, the cabin's just sitting empty. And family helps family, right? So we're just freshening it up for them." I waited for the part where she said for them to visit or for them to use sometimes or anything that had a leash on it. She didn't say any of that. "For them to live in," I said. "Well, for now," Roy said, finally speaking, "until they get back on their feet." I want to be honest here. There was a part of me, a small part, that wasn't even surprised. There was a part of me that had been bracing for some version of this for a long time. Because this is what they do. This is what they have always done. June is 2 years younger than me, and from the time we were kids, she was the soft one. The one who needed help, the one who couldn't be expected to handle things, while I was the one who was capable, the one who didn't need anything, the one who could be expected to give. June got the new car at 16 because she was anxious about driving. I got the hand-me-down Civic because I was responsible. June got her wedding paid for because she'd had a hard year. I paid for my own bar exam prep, my own moving costs, my own everything, because I was capable. Capable was the word they used like it was a compliment, but it was really a permission slip. Permission to never give me anything. Permission to assume. And here we were. "Mom," I said, and I worked very hard to keep my voice flat. "How did you get in here?" "You gave us the key," she said with that little laugh again, the one that meant don't be silly. "I gave you a key for emergencies, for if a pipe burst, for if there was a storm and someone needed to check on the place. I did not give you a key to demolish my house. It's not demolishing, honey, it's improving. Roy's contractor is excellent, you'll see when it's done. I want them out." "Who?" "The contractor." "June." "Cyrus." "All of it. I want every person who is not me out of this cabin by tonight." Roy stepped forward then, and I saw his face do that thing. It does, that little tightening around the mouth, and he said, "When did you become such a cold-hearted person?" I'll never forget that sentence. I've replayed it probably 2,000 times. When did you become such a cold-hearted person? As if I had been the one who broke into someone else's house. As if I were the one who'd taken a sledgehammer to a wall I did not own. As if I were the unreasonable one for not wanting candy pink wallpaper in the bedroom I'd designed and paid for and slept in alone for years. I didn't answer him. I just turned and walked back out to my car. I sat in the driver's seat with the door open and my feet on the gravel, and I did the thing my law school mentor told me to do when I felt the heat rising. I breathed in for 4, held for 4, breathed out for 6, 3 times, 4 times. By the 5th time, my hands had stopped shaking enough that I could pick up my phone. I called my paralegal first. Her name was Margaret, and she was a 63-year-old woman who had seen everything and was unshockable. I told her very briefly what was happening. I told her I needed her to pull every property record I had on file by Monday morning. Everyone, the cabin, the house Mom and Roy lived in, the condo June and Cyrus rented, the rental property Roy had been managing, all of it. She said, "Honey, are you safe?" I said, "I'm fine. Just pull the records." Then I called my friend Bryce, who's a real estate photographer and lives 40 minutes away, and I asked him if he could be at the cabin in an hour with his good camera. He didn't ask why, he just said he was on his way. While I waited for Bryce, I went back inside. Mom and Roy were in the kitchen now, talking in low voices, the way people do when they realize the temperature has changed. I ignored them. I walked through every room. I opened my phone's camera and I started taking pictures of my own. The torn-out bathroom, the missing wall, the tile boxes, the wallpaper, the coffee cups in the sink, the tarp, the pile of debris in the corner of what used to be my bedroom, the contractor's business card sitting on the counter, that one I made sure to get clearly both sides, the work order, which I found tucked under a coffee cup, with Roy's signature on it as the property owner. That last one I almost laughed at. Roy had signed a work order claiming to be the property owner of a cabin that was deeded entirely to me. That wasn't just rude, that was fraud. Mom came up behind me while I was photographing the work order. "What are you doing?" "Documenting," I said. "Documenting what?" "My evidence." She made a face like I had just spoken Russian. "Evidence of what?" "Honey, this isn't a courtroom." "Not yet," I said. Bryce showed up at 4:30. I let him in without explaining anything to my mother and Roy, who were now standing on the back deck whispering. He spent 45 minutes shooting every angle of every room with proper lighting, proper focus, and a wide lens that captured exactly how much had been ripped out. He didn't say a word the whole time. When he left, he hugged me at the door and said, "Whatever this is, get them." I locked the cabin behind me at 6 p.m. and drove back to Philadelphia. I did not say goodbye to my mother. I did not say goodbye to my mother. I did not say goodbye to Roy. I drove the whole 3 hours in silence, no music, just the sound of the road, and I thought about every single thing I'd let slide for the last decade. The pattern was so clean once I let myself look at it. I had bought my mother's house originally. Did I mention that? When my biological father died, he died when I was 24, of a heart attack, a thing I still don't quite know how to feel about. He left me a small life insurance policy. Not enormous, $240,000. My mother had been about to lose the house she and Roy had been living in because Roy had been laid off again and they were 6 months behind on the mortgage. I paid off the mortgage. I didn't take it as a loan. I bought the house in my own name and I let them live in it for what I called rent, but which was actually less than the property tax and insurance combined. They'd been living there essentially for free for 7 years. The condo June and Cyrus lived in Redding, that was also mine. I bought it 3 years ago when June called me crying because they couldn't qualify for a mortgage and they were going to have to move in with my mother. I put it in my name, given them a lease at below market rent, and told them when they were ready to buy it from me, I'd sell at cost. Roy's rental property, the duplex in Allentown he was so proud of managing, was also in my portfolio. He had no equity in it. None. He brought me a deal 4 years ago, said it was a great investment, said he'd manage it for me in exchange for a cut of the rent. I'd bought it. I'd let him collect a management fee. He had been telling people at his bowling league for years that he owned a rental property. He didn't own anything. None of them did. This is what I want you to understand. They thought they were renovating my cabin. They didn't realize they were squatters in 3 of my other properties at the exact same time, and they had been, every one of them, for years. I had made myself their landlord because I loved them. I had thought I was helping. I had thought in some quiet, stupid corner of my heart that if I just kept providing, kept stabilizing, kept being the safety net, then one day they would notice. They would notice that I was the one holding the whole thing up. They would say thank you. They would say we see you. Instead, they took the spare key to my cabin and tore up my bathroom for my sister. I want to skip ahead a little, because the next part happened in a blur. I worked all day Saturday and all day Sunday. Margaret came into the office on Sunday afternoon, bless her, and we pulled every file. We pulled the deeds, the leases, the rent rolls, the property tax records. I called my law school friend Damon, who specialized in real estate litigation, and I drove to his apartment in Center City with 2 coffees and laid the whole thing out on his living room floor. He listened. He asked 3 questions. Then he said, "How aggressive do you want to be?" I said, "I want to be exactly as aggressive as the law allows." Damon smiled, just a little. I love when clients say that. We mapped it out together. The leases I'd given my mother and June were both month to month, which meant Pennsylvania law required 30 days' notice to terminate. We could serve those notices on Monday. The duplex Roy managed had no lease at all between us because we'd kept it a verbal handshake. That meant I could revoke his management role with a single email. The cabin was a different beast entirely. The cabin involved breaking and entering, criminal mischief, destruction of property, and depending on how the contractor had been engaged, possibly fraud. Damon said the cabin was where the criminal piece could come in. He said if I wanted to pursue charges, I could. I said I wanted to talk to the contractor first. Monday morning, I called the contractor. I introduced myself. I gave him my bar number. I told him calmly that I was the sole owner of the cabin in question, that I had photographs and time-stamped evidence of the work that had been done, that I had not authorized any of it, and that the work order he had on file had been signed by a man who was not the owner of the property and who had no legal authority to authorize work. I told him I had 2 paths in front of me. Path 1, he and his company became co-defendants in a civil suit and possibly subjects of a criminal complaint for accepting a fraudulent work order without verifying ownership. Path 2, he provided me with a sworn statement detailing exactly who hired him, what he was told, what was paid, and by whom, and we negotiated a separate settlement for the work that had been done. He picked Path 2 within 40 seconds. He told me everything. Roy had hired him. Roy had presented a property tax document with my name on it, but it told the contractor he was my stepfather and was acting on my behalf. Roy had paid a deposit of $14,000 in cash. Cash! The contractor admitted on a recorded line that he'd thought it was strange, but Roy had been so confident and the deposit was so generous that he hadn't pushed. I had him. By Tuesday, eviction notices had been filed and personally served at my mother's house and at the condo in Redding. By Tuesday afternoon, I had sent Roy a certified letter terminating his role in the duplex and informing him that any rent collected from that point forward was to be deposited directly into my management account and that I would be conducting a full financial audit of the 4 years he had been managing the property. The audit, by the way, eventually turned up about $31,000 in unaccounted for rent that had quietly disappeared into Roy's personal checking account. That's a different lawsuit. My phone started ringing Tuesday evening. I didn't pick up. I let the calls go to voicemail. There were 47 of them by Wednesday morning. Mom, Roy, June, Cyrus, an aunt I hadn't spoken to in 3 years suddenly weighing in. My grandmother on Roy's side, who I'd met twice. Roy's brother. My mother again, 12 more times. The voicemails went through the predictable cycle. First, confusion. Then, anger. Then, threats. Then, pleading. Then a return to anger. There was one from June where she screamed at me for so long the voicemail cut her off and she had to call back to finish. There was one from Roy where he called me a name I won't repeat in this telling. There was one from my mother where she just cried for 2 minutes straight and then hung up. The one that almost got me was from June. It was the 17th voicemail of the day. Her voice was small and exhausted. She said, "I didn't know about the cabin. I swear I didn't know they did it like that. Mom told me you said it was okay. I picked the tile because Mom said you wanted me to pick it. I'm sorry. Please call me." I sat in my car in the parking garage at work and I listened to that voicemail 4 times. Here's the thing I have to be honest about. I almost called her back. I almost did. Because for half a second I thought, well, maybe she didn't know. Maybe she's a victim too. Maybe Mom played us both. And then I thought about the candy pink wallpaper. You don't pick out $80 roll wallpaper for someone else's house without asking. You just don't. Even if you genuinely believed your mother had cleared it with your sister, you would, at some point, pick up the phone and say, "Hey, are you sure you want pink? I want to make sure I'm getting the right shade." You would text a picture. You would send a Pinterest board. You would do anything that involved the actual owner of the actual house. June hadn't done any of those things. Because June, like Mom, like Roy, had stopped seeing me as a person years ago. I was the bank, I was the cabin, I was the safety net, I was the capable one. And capable people don't need to be consulted because capable people will always say yes. I deleted the voicemail without responding. The eviction hearings happened over the next 6 weeks. My mother and Roy fought it. They hired a lawyer, a guy who looked like he hadn't won a case since the Clinton administration, and they tried every angle. They argued I had created an implied co-ownership by accepting their rent payments. Damon shut that down with the actual lease document I had made them sign in writing every year, like an idiot who somehow knew this day was coming. They argued I had emotionally abandoned the family and was acting in bad faith. The judge was visibly unimpressed. They argued the cabin was family property because we had spent 3 Christmases there. The judge actually laughed at that one. The eviction was upheld. They had 30 days to vacate. June and Cyrus didn't fight at all. June showed up at the hearing alone, with a binder of papers she'd printed off the internet, and she tried to represent herself, and she cried through most of it. I sat across the room from her, and I did not look at her face. I looked at the back wall. I looked at the back wall. I looked at the judge. I looked at my own hands. When the gavel came down, June walked out of the courtroom past my row, and she stopped at my chair, and she said very quietly, "I hope you're proud of yourself." I didn't answer. The damage assessment on the cabin came in at $96,000 to restore. That included the demolition cleanup, the wall reconstruction, replacing the bathroom from the studs out, the hardwood floor, the missing furniture, which my mother eventually admitted under threat of an additional theft charge, had been donated to charity, meaning sold, and a bedroom rebuild. The contractor settled with me for $40,000 of that, which he wired the same week. I sued Roy personally for the remaining $56,000, plus the $31,000 he'd skimmed off the duplex, plus legal fees. I won that one in default judgment. He didn't even show up. It took about 10 months for the dust to fully settle. My mother and Roy moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in a town I'd never heard of. June and Cyrus moved in with Cyrus's parents in Ohio. Roy filed for bankruptcy 7 months later. The duplex sold. The cabin was rebuilt, slate gray and white, the way I'd had it, and I went back up there for the first time on a Saturday in late September. I want to tell you that I felt triumphant. I want to tell you that I sat on the porch with a glass of wine and watched the sun go down and felt powerful and free. I sat on the porch. I had a glass of wine. The sun went down, and what I felt was tired. Just tired. Tired in a way that wasn't bad. Exactly, but wasn't victory either. It was the tiredness of finally putting down something heavy I'd been carrying for so long I had forgotten it was heavy. A few weeks after that, I got a letter in the mail from my mother. Handwritten, on the kind of stationery she used to send thank you notes on. I held it in my hands for a long time before I opened it. Part of me was hoping for an apology. Not because I thought it would change anything, but because some childish part of me still wanted it. Still wanted her to say, I see you now. I see what I did. I'm sorry. The letter was 3 pages long. She blamed me for everything. She said I had broken the family. She said I had weaponized the law against people who loved me. She said I would die alone and bitter and that one day I would understand that family was the only thing that mattered. She did not, in 3 full pages, apologize for anything. She did not mention the cabin once. I read it twice. Then I folded it back into the envelope. Then I walked into my kitchen, lit the stove, and burned it over the sink. That part actually did feel powerful. Just for a second. Roy lost his job 8 months in, not because of me, not directly. The bankruptcy filing became public record, and his employer at the time, he worked for a small commercial contracting firm, apparently had a clause about financial standing. They cut him loose. He spent a long time looking for new work and eventually ended up at a hardware store, which I only know because a cousin of mine sent me a photo of him in a green apron with no caption. Like she thought I would enjoy it. I didn't enjoy it. But I did not enjoy it either. June reached out to me one more time, about a year after everything. A long email. She said she had been in therapy. She said she was beginning to see how the family had used me. She said she did not expect forgiveness, but she wanted me to know she was sorry. She said she missed me. I read that email 5 times. I drafted 3 different responses. I didn't send any of them. In the end, I wrote back 2 sentences. I said, I'm glad you're in therapy. I'm not ready. I haven't heard from her since. People ask me sometimes. Friends, mostly, the ones who know the broad strokes, if I have regrets. If I would do it differently. The honest answer is yes. I would. I would do the eviction faster. I would have stopped paying their bills 5 years earlier. I would have never given my mother that spare key. I would have, somewhere around year 3 of being everyone's bank, sat them all down and said the words out loud, I am not your safety net. I am your daughter. I am your sister. I am a person. I didn't say those words. I let them assume. I let them take. I let them tear out a wall in the only place in the world I had ever felt fully safe, and I let them do it with my own key. Because for years and years I had been quietly handing them keys to everything I owned. And I had been too tired and too lonely and too desperate to be loved to notice that none of them had ever, not once, given me a key to anything of theirs. The cabin is mine again. The wallpaper is gone. The bathroom is slate gray and white. The reading chair is back in its corner. There's a new lock on the door, and the spare key isn't under the 3rd stone anymore. There isn't a spare key at all. If a pipe bursts, I'll deal with it myself. I sleep through the night up there now. All the way through. And in the mornings I make coffee in my own kitchen and I drink it on my own porch and I watch the lake and I do not pick up the phone. That, in the end, is what they took from me. And what I had to take back. Not the cabin. The right to be the one who decides who walks through my own front door. I think about that weekend at the cabin more often than I'd like to admit. Not because I miss any of them, but because I'm still untangling the lesson it left in me. The thing nobody tells you about being the capable one in a family is that capability becomes a kind of cage. Roy didn't tear down that wall because he was a bold man. He tore it down because for a decade I had taught him, with my silence and my checkbook, that there would be no consequences. Every unpaid mortgage I covered, every below-market lease I signed for June, every handshake deal I let Roy run on the duplex, those were the bricks I handed them, one by one, to build the doorway they eventually walked through with a sledgehammer. Cause and effect doesn't care about love. It doesn't care about blood. If you keep planting the same seed, you will keep harvesting the same crop, and I had been planting yes for so long I had forgotten what no even sounded like in my own voice. What I want anyone listening to take from this isn't bitterness, it's the opposite. It's the quiet, stubborn discipline of three things I had to relearn the hard way. The first is character. Real character isn't measured by how much you give. It's measured by whether what you give is honest, whether it has a beginning and an end, whether it makes the other person stronger or weaker. I thought I was being good. I was actually being avoidant. I was buying my family's silence so I wouldn't have to say the hard sentences out loud. The second is judgment. I want to be clear that walking away from people who've harmed you is not coldness, it's clarity. For years, I let my mother frame every boundary I tried to set as cruelty, and I believed her because she was my mother, and the part of me that was still 6 years old wanted to be a good daughter. But a thinking person has to be willing, eventually, to look at the evidence in front of her. The evidence at my cabin was the wall on the floor. I just had to be brave enough to read it correctly. And the third is grit. I'll be honest, the easy thing would have been to forgive. To take the call from June, to accept the half apology and let everyone slide back into their old chairs around me. Forgiveness offered too soon is just exhaustion in a nicer outfit. The harder thing was to hold the line for 10 months while my phone rang and my mother's letter burned in the sink. The harder thing was to rebuild the bathroom slowly, slate by myself. I didn't lose my family that weekend. I had never really had the family I thought I had. What I gained was a door I could close, a key only I could hold, and the slow, honest knowledge that being kind to yourself is sometimes the only kindness left in the room.